All right. Hey, same Chromebook rules. I have made posts, so if you want to follow along the slides, you are welcome to do that. Do not get ahead of me. It's that simple, okay? You're writing. You should be on the president that I'm on. You should be on the screen that I'm on. Definitely, I don't have any patience for being on a totally different website, especially a game website or a video website, nothing like that. All right, so the Chromebook is a tool for using right now. It does help a lot of you. Keeps me from, you saying, please go back or straining your eyes to see the screen. So we're using the tool. I think it is being effective in both of my classes. I'm watching it be effective, but Taylor's got eyes in the back of the room. Don't be on a different screen so that we don't have to have any concerns with that. All right, so here are the Cold War presidents of the Cold War era. I hope you're getting tired of seeing this screen. I hope you're like, bro, we got it. If you got this screen memorized, you got these 8 presidents memorized, then good. Then you get to be tired of the screen. But if you don't have this memorized just yet, that's why I keep showing it to you. Today we're going over Truman through Johnson. So that's 33rd President of the United States through the 36th President of the United States. And then Friday, Monday, and Tuesday, we'll be walking through the rest of the presidents. These are presidents of the modern era. Where does our class stop? Obama. Okay, our class content is only going to go as far as the election of 2008. President Barack Obama, first African American to be elected to presidency. However, the more recent history of Trump and Biden, I'm going to fit in some information about them as well, just because it's current, it's history. But I am specifically making the point. Don't clutter your brain with Trump and Biden factoids. Okay, it's not on the exam. Our class itself stops at President Obama. So I'll feed you some information, but I want you to really focus on the important stuff at this point. That's another thing that I'm going to fit into our EOC review is a focused review. The side stories, I'm not going there anymore. You got a question that kind of gets us off track, I'm going to be like, that's a great question, but not right now, okay? You can see me after class. I'll answer your questions, but I'm focusing our review as part of trusting the process. All right, so here we are, President Truman. Now, in terms of your notes, anytime I show the man's picture, I want you to use that block that has his picture to kind of outline all of his activities. I call it a baseball card, right? Just like you write all the statistics down, this is the baseball card. Many of these we've already gone over, especially if it fit into the Cold War. We've already talked about it. But there are a couple of new nuggets coming at you as well. So, for example, Truman, write this all down where his picture is, but then you can see the GI Bill. That's something totally different. That's a place where you'll write that information by itself. So he is President Roosevelt's vice president. He becomes president when FDR dies in office. You remember I said, knock, knock, knock. Congratulations, Mr. President. Please come with us. What did he learn the second that he became president? He learned of the existence of the atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project and the atomic bomb. Yeah, so all of a sudden, hey, Mr. President, now you have to decide if you want to use it. He does decide to use the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's a very weighty decision, something that weighed on him, but he decided to use it. We read some primary sources, his own writing about his opinions on it. Would he do it again? He said yes, he would have. So that's part of his legacy is he dropped the atomic bombs in war. The Truman Doctrine, and then fits into that the Marshall Plan. Of course, that says that we will support nations threatened by communism. That's the playbook. Truman Doctrine is the playbook. There's several plays in the playbook. Marshall and money. We should always associate Marshall Plan with money. It is money to rebuild countries in Western Europe. Our friends, bombed out, broken down, war has been going on for 4 years. We're going to rebuild Western Europe with money. Containment, I hope you'll never forget containment. Why? How did I demonstrate containment? Yeah, the splash zone. And containment is what? Well, yes, keep it from spreading. And containment is the lid. Containment is the lid. So we're going to draw the line. We recognize some countries are inside of the water. They're lost to communism. But containment is the lid. Putting a lid on the container. There's the word itself, containment. That was all Truman. And then finally, he was talked about it just yesterday. He integrated the military with Executive Order 9981. Very significant portion of the civil rights movement, the integration, desegregation of the military, black and white, and red and yellow, black and white service members serving in the same unit. So You know the old song, red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the children of the world. All right, so that's Harry Truman. That's basically his baseball card. I know that some of you are still writing on that. That's fine. That's why you got Chromebooks. So I'm going to move on to the GI Bill. GI Bill, and I think really the first thing I got to make sure we understand is what is a GI? Say the phrase GI. What is it? G.I. Joe comes to mind. Okay, so we have that understanding.
General investigator.
What really is a GI? Oh, it's good. I get to teach you something today. GI is slang for soldier, right? It becomes the slang for someone who's a soldier. It stands for government issued. So just like, and the reason that phrase comes about is because a lot of equipment that be sent overseas, whether it was weapons or uniforms or food, the boxes would be stamped with GI, government issued, right? It comes from the government, it's government issued. Well, that becomes slang for just a soldier in general, a GI. And from that, the generic name Joe, G.I. Joe. So yeah, you guys know that that's a cartoon and it's a soldier, G.I. Joe. Well, GI Bill refers to benefits for returning soldiers, soldiers returning from the war. Officially, it's called the GI Bill of Rights, which to me, that kind of gives it the power of our own Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights to the Constitution. It's like saying, what benefits do the GIs deserve to have? Law that's passed in 1944, specifically to help returning veterans buy homes and pay for higher education, i.e. college. Low interest loans for homes and businesses for the soldiers returning from World War II, and financial grants or scholarships or just money for those who want to attend college. These benefits are still relevant to this day. A lot of people serve in the military for the benefit of college money, and there is a home loan program called the GI Bill Home Loan. I personally, give you my story, have benefited from both of them. I attend Liberty University online. I go to school right now. I have assignments just like you. Got one due tonight. And I'm going on the GI Bill. Now today it's called the post 9/11 GI Bill. It's been updated since September 11th. Obviously it's a new era. There's a whole new crop of veterans coming after 9/11, but it's still the GI Bill, helps with college. Additionally, the second big perk is home loan. It's a very low interest rate home loan. If you're eligible for the GI loan, you don't take anything else, right? It's the best rate around. Nobody can beat it. Highland, Ag South, F&B, any lender is not going to beat the GI Bill's interest rate. The reason is it's backed by the government, right? It's actually literally government money. So even if the borrower, let's say a family goes on, they can't make their payments, well, that loan is backed by the government. It's guaranteed repayment, like all that kind of stuff. So it's a very low risk, low interest loan. And the bottom line is it's a benefit to the veterans. At the time, it was a benefit to veterans returning from war, and many of them were drafted. Many of them didn't choose to go to the war, so it's kind of a benefit, a thank you. It's a thank you to those who served. Today, and they very much deserved it, right? Many people coming back from the war, they kind of lost their job. When they left the military, they essentially lost their job. So this is another way to stave off unemployment. Instead of people being unemployed, they are actively going to college. They're getting a higher education. They're going to have a higher level job based on that education. So big benefit to society to have educated people, and it all comes from the GI Bill. A lot of young people at this time had experiences that they maybe never would have had otherwise because of the GI Bill. Maybe they're born on the farm, they're raised on the farm, they think they'll stay on the farm for forever. Well, they get drafted into service, or maybe they sign up, they go across the ocean, they see the world, they fight for world peace and freedom, right? They have experiences in the war. They come back and they realize there's more than just the farm in Kansas. The GI Bill is a way that they can continue to level up in their education, opportunities available to them. It was a good thing. It was a reward and a thank you for those who are coming back from the war, and it was good for society as a whole. Of course, you want more educated people. And it is all really still true to this day. So to make sure I've said everything, it's important because it held off a potential post-war unemployment crisis. Consumerism expanded, and we've had that conversation at length. People purchasing want items, well, now they're considered need items, luxury items, and fits into the idea of a low interest rate loan and a line of credit. And then additionally, GI Bill helped drive post-war economy and rewarded veterans and their families for the sacrifices made during the war. That is the GI Bill, the original GI Bill of Rights. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what it is today. The post 9/11 GI Bill rewards veterans to this day. Today, of course, we have an all-volunteer military. I've told you that. No one's going to tell you that you have to go to war or go to the service, but it is a perk. A lot of people are drawn to military service because of the benefits of it, and the benefits of college money and low-interest home loan are kind of big ones that the recruiters are always going to throw at you. They're always going to tell you about the college perks. All right, I see some of y'all on the right screen, you're writing. So I am going to move on to President Eisenhower. That rounds out Truman. We talked about the rest of his Cold War stuff inside of our Cold War classes. This is my favorite West Pointer, President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, you may remember him as the 5-star general who was the leader of the Normandy invasion, a.k.a., what was his nickname? D-Day, yep, and probably less commonly, you might even see Operation Overlord, but this was the beginning of the end in the European theater, the turning point battle in the war in Europe, eventually leading to the death of Hitler and victory in Europe Day. So this is President Eisenhower. After his military time, he goes on to become the president. He is president during the Korean War, and he brings it to an end. He ends the war. Did I say that right? Ends the Korean War. What? Oh, because the Korean War is not a war. One, it's not a war. And two, it's not over, right? It's not over. There's not a peace treaty to this day. However, Eisenhower negotiates the armistice, which is a laying down of the arms. And that is the 38th parallel as the boundary, as we discussed. I got the barbed wire up here from the DMZ. So it doesn't end the Korean War. That's not quite the accurate way to say it, even though that's how a lot of people will say it. But he does bring about the armistice of the Korean War. In our class, we're going to talk about something super interesting that he did. Actually, it's not, right? I can't even try to make this interesting, but it is very impactful to our country. And our class has been hinged a lot on influence and impact. Even if it's not the most interesting item, in history. And that is the National Interstate and Defense Highway Act. So that's next up. And then also he leads through Mccarthyism. Not exactly something he did himself, but he leads through it in his presidency, so we'll talk about it here. National Interstate and Defense Highway Act. This it provided funding for 42,500 miles of roads throughout the United States. The roads that will become our interstates. Raise your hand if you have ever traveled on an interstate. I would guess that every one of you who have ever arrived at some destination and traveled on an interstate, right? I-95 goes through Savannah, into Jacksonville. I-10 is going to take you through Panama City Beach and Gulf Shores. Like you've driven on an interstate before. Interstate is not a state highway, it's not a local road, it's not a county road. It's a big paved 4-lane or more highway that goes through states. Eisenhower saw the need to create this road network following, really for him personally, goes back as far as World War I, but also World War II. See, when the country needed to mobilize to go to war, the only roads we had in the country were poorly improved, 2-lane, maybe paved, but likely not two-lane roads. Inadequate. Bottom line is they were not good enough to mobilize the country to war. If you need to get your military machines to the port cities, right, to the ocean front, and you're moving them from all the various bases on 2-lane roads, and there's an issue on a 2-lane road, what are you going to have? Traffic jams all throughout the country. So all that to say, these 2-lane roads were inadequate. They were not good enough to mobilize the country for war. So Eisenhower is a very forward thinker. Okay? He's thinking way into the future. What if we need to mobilize for war again? We need better roads. So his legislation provides funding for these 42,500 miles of highways throughout the United States. Has anybody ever seen a sign like this blue one right here? Traveled on the highway. I'm going to bet you probably have, but maybe you just haven't noticed it. What's that? Didn't read it? Yeah. So here's my challenge to you now. Next time you're on a highway, if you're headed to Atlanta or Jacksonville or Savannah, you're going to be on an interstate of some sort.
I was going to Savannah.
Yeah.
Like near a military base.
Okay.
And I think
Something like that? Yeah, good. So it says it pretty plainly, the Eisenhower interstate system. The logo that they use for it is the rank of the 5-star general. I've always found that interesting. I think they could have picked a lot of representations of Eisenhower, but they chose to acknowledge his military service and his high rank with the 5-star logo right there. So my challenge to you then is to pay attention. Next time you're on an interstate, look for a sign like this. It'll be on the right-hand side of the road as you're driving. They're spaced out every 10 or so miles. I've never really figured out the pattern. I don't know exactly how they choose where to put them, but every 10 or so miles, you're going to see one of these signs. And it is just a nationwide recognition of Eisenhower's efforts to build better highways across the country. So move on here, I'll make sure I've said it all. The old 2-lane system of roads was inadequate. New routes and wider roads constructed to connect the population centers across the country. Useful to the military, right? That was the original design. And that's why it's called the Defense Highway Act. The original purpose was not so you can go on a beach vacation. Was not so you can road trip to grandma's. It was not so you can road trip all the way to Las Vegas. The original purpose was to help the country mobilize for war if necessary. However, a very important side effect is that it leads to the rise of suburbia. Now people can work outside of the city center and drive in on these highway roads on a daily basis. Used to be, you had to live pretty close where you're going to work. If you worked in the factory, you had to live in an apartment building right nearby it, right? And that's where we had the bad tenement living and bad living conditions for the laborers. Well, now you can live on the outskirts of the city or even an additional city, which we start to call suburbs. I'll give you an example for Atlanta, McDonough. Town of McDonough is a suburb to Atlanta. It's a city in its own right. It's a large city in its own right, not as big as Atlanta. A lot of people in McDonough work in Atlanta. They ride on the interstates on a daily basis to get to work. Couldn't do that on an old rickety 2-lane dirt road, but you can do that on the highway. Picture here, this is it's kind of a complex interchange, but it's not the most complex of interchanges that we have in the country. Anybody know the super famous one in Atlanta? What it's called?
That just looks confusing.
That does look confusing, and it's not even the most confusing one. Anybody know that there's a super complex interchange in Atlanta?
I know it is.
It's called, It's called the Spaghetti Junction. Yeah, because I need to pull up a picture. I'll do it at our bathroom break. Because when you look at it, it's almost like you're looking at a bowl of spaghetti with the squiggly noodles just going all directions. So Eddie will pull it up. I need to slap it into my slideshow. Spaghetti Junction. Spaghetti Junction. So it's really an amazing marvel, like an engineering feat. That the fact that Spaghetti Junction got built and that cars drive on it and they don't get lost. I mean, I'll probably get lost without GPS, but Spaghetti Junction is a really amazing interchange, kind of a convergence of multiple avenues, and then of course the byways and highways take you whatever direction you're trying to go. Here is the completion of those 42,000 miles. Okay, this is the original design of the highways. A little bit more crowded in the east, a little bit more wide open as we get to the west. This is what it looked like on the 50th anniversary. So 2006 increases by about 4,000 miles. So we continue to build and grow. Do some of these numbers, do you recognize some of these numbers now? Right, I said I-95 and I-20 and 75 and 85. Yeah, well, do you see a pattern in the naming convention? Can you take a guess as to the numbering? Yeah, so check this out. You're about to be mind blown. All right, I'm gonna give you an aha moment. You've ridden on highways your whole life. You're about to have the now I get it kind of moment. All right, these are routes that go east and west, and the numbers end in a 0. So if a highway is named and it ends in a 0, it's going east to west. Also, the numbering system, it's high numbers in the north, and it descends to low numbers in the south. That's why I-10 is what goes through Jacksonville and Panama City and Pensacola and Gulf Shores. So if you've ever ridden on I-10, it's because it's south. So east-west highways, interstates, are labeled with a 0. North and south interstates are labeled with a 5. So Oklahoma City
Hey,
kid.
just please release the baseball players.
Woohoo! As an Oklahoma City boy, I was always riding on I-35. That's the big one that cut right through Oklahoma City. Of course, we have 85, 95. Those are ones that you might ride based off of traveling in Savannah. So the more you know. Is that an aha moment for you? Oh, now I understand why they're. Oh, and further, there are low numbers to the west. We got I-5. I've never ridden on I-5, and high numbers on the East Coast, which is why we have I-95. So the more you know, life is interesting. There you have it. So, it's just staring at your face. There's just staring you in the face your whole life. But if you didn't understand the numbering system, well, now you do. Now you do. So if someone ever says they're riding or traveling on I-5, you can immediately know they're talking about California because that's where it's located. All right, moving on to one more. This is inside Eisenhower. We'll finish it out. This is Mccarthyism. Mccarthyism is nicknamed after the man you see on the screen, that is Joseph McCarthy. It's actually a derogatory name because what it refers to is making accusations of disloyalty or treason, especially related to communism. Have we ever seen this before in U.S. history? Yes, how? You're a witch. You're a witch. You're a witch. Prove to me that you're not. Prove to me that you're not a witch. Yes. So the Salem witch trials, actually, that heritage, that history, leads to McCarthyism to be called a witch hunt. Whenever you hear the phrase witch hunt, it's referring to the Salem witch trials, okay, history. Well, McCarthyism wasn't dealing with accusations of being a witch, but rather accusations of being a communist. So you're a communist, you're a communist, you're a communist. Prove to me that you're not. Right? The accusation stuck. If you were called a communist, you had to prove that you weren't, and the burden of proof was on you. A lot of people were ruined. Their reputations were destroyed. Their financial situation was destroyed because they're accused of being communists. How this all happens is that Senator Joseph McCarthy, the guy you see on the screen, he was a lesser-known, very young junior senator from the state of Wisconsin until he really makes a name for himself in 1950. He claimed that he had a list of 205 card-carrying communists who were employed in the U.S. Department of State. He says, our government is ridden with communists, and I have a list that proves it. He didn't say any names at that point. He just said, I know I have a list, and I can prove it to you. So he was given power in the Senate to start running trials. He could call forward anyone he wanted to. They had to testify under oath. That's the power he had as a senator. I think in the end, he was really power hungry. To me, that's what it is. He was really power hungry, and he enjoyed being in charge of these communist trials. In the end, it lasts about 4 years, 1950 to 1954. He is actually discredited in the end. Many of his accusations, many of the people that came to testify before the Senate, there was not proof that they were communists. It's difficult to understand that communism used to be a political party, not some tyrannical ideal. So there were card-carrying members of the Communist Party. There was an American Communist Party. And his accusations were that these people are in our government, they're trying to ruin our government, and I'm going to find them. I'm going to prove who they are, I'm going to find them. In the end, very few of his accusations panned out. Not zero of them, but very few of his accusations panned out. And it was generally agreed upon that this was a kind of a bad time in U.S. history because of all the lies and all the accusations that went on. The phrase McCarthyism is actually kind of a derogatory term. It uses his name, but in a derogatory way, almost like poking at him, almost making fun of him, because in the end he was he lodged about a bunch of unfair accusations. Sometimes called the second Red Scare. We talked about the first Red Scare inside of World War I. Well, this is the second Red Scare, comes out of this time period with Senator McCarthy. A big industry that was hit very hard with his accusations. You want to take a guess as to what industry that was?
Oil.
Good guess, but no. Good guess, but no. Hollywood. Hollywood. Not to say that those two industries didn't have some accusations in it, but Hollywood. He accused a lot of directors and actors and writers of being communists. And, well, these days we might say canceled. We might say they got canceled. They got blacklisted. A lot of them could not get work anymore. A lot of them would not get hired onto another film. to write another script or to act in another movie. So he very much attacked Hollywood. And today we might call it cancel culture. He got a lot of people canceled from their jobs in Hollywood. So I'm going to pause there for our bathroom break. When we come back, we're going to look at this dreamboat, handsome fella, John F. Kennedy. You might say I have a man crush on this guy right here. I'm going to tell you all about it. I'm going to tell you all about it. President Zelensky and President Kennedy. I got a man crush on both of them. Bro, you be tripping. What they said. Pull up Spaghetti Junction. Got Spaghetti Junction on the screen. So, see if you would want to drive and throw a shot at that. Why are you looking over here?
I'm not from the I'll teach you. Yeah, it's going.
So I got Spaghetti Junction on the screen there. Would you want to drive through that without any navigational assistance? I would, yeah. That is definitely a part of modern engineering. Yeah, Mr. Taylor says just stay in the middle, right?
Stay in the middle. The one on the bottom is 6 lanes.
I got this little.
Okay, so 6 lanes here. These 2 are 4 lanes, and the rest of them are 3 lanes.
Oh, I was one of them.
So there's about 50 lanes across the net.
Whoa. That's all right. Death, destruction, assassination, conspiracy. Who's interested? Good. This is the kind of stuff we like to debate about a lot. And the life and presidency of President John F. Kennedy is definitely characterized by all those things I just said. A lot of times his nickname is Jack. Okay, nickname for John can be Jack. So you may hear him called Jack Kennedy. And here's what we're going to talk about pertaining to him. The 1960 presidential debates, which were televised. It is going to change campaigning forever. He is the one who had a goal to put a man on the moon by the end of the 60s. We did. Cuban Missile Crisis, we've already discussed it, but I'll remind you. His role in civil rights, and then finally his untimely end due to assassination. These are the things you should write under his face card, right? You're making a baseball card out of him. And then we are going to talk about each of these along the way. So first up, first of all, anybody ever hear about his possible connection to Marilyn Monroe?
Oh, yeah, I heard about it.
Oh, yeah, you heard about it? What did you hear about it?
I heard he came down.
Yeah, so President Kennedy is not known as a man of utmost moral character, at least in terms of maybe his marriage. He was known to be a womanizer. He was known to to lack fidelity or faithfulness to his wife. And as the story goes, and this really spicy anecdote here, it is said that he was connected to Marilyn Monroe, potentially in an affair. There's a lot of mystery about it, right? There's a, huh?
Is that how she's famous?
Oh, yeah. Oh, is that how she's famous? No, she was famous in her own way. She was famous, and then she got associated with the president. So what's going on in this picture here is that on his birthday in 1962, she sang a very sultry, soft, low, throaty, raspy version of Happy Birthday, Mr. President. And this is actually the only photograph that exists from that night. A lot of people thought for sure that there was a connection there, that they had a thing going on. It is unknown whether they connected on that night. However, there is evidence. I've done a lot of reading. There is evidence to show that they spent time alone on other occasions, and I'll just let your brain fill in the blanks there. So the takeaway on that is sometimes people lacking some corners of moral character, they can still be good leaders. Like, he was a good leader for the country. He led through difficult times. He was strong in the face of communism and potential war on the brink. But he also lacks a certain amount of integrity and character, and they had their own marital strife because of it. His life's also marked by tragedy. He lost 2 children young, and not unlike the Lincolns in that regard. Just because you're rich, famous, and the president doesn't mean you're going to have an easy life. Let's talk about how he became president. So the 1960 presidential debates. It is Kennedy versus Nixon, Richard Nixon. And we have already talked about Nixon a little bit. We know that he loses in 1960, meaning Kennedy wins. Well, why? Largely in part to presidential debates being on television for the first time ever. What this did was put an emphasis on appearances instead of just your debating. In the past, when debates were on the radio or even printed in newspapers, it was all about the content of your speech. It's all about what you had to say. Well, now that debates are being shown on television, it puts an emphasis on the appearance of the candidates. And in that regard, President Kennedy was much more physically appealing. He just looked better than his opponent, Richard Nixon. This boosted his popularity overall, eventually leading him to victory. So let me tell you now, the 1960 presidential debates is actually a series of 4 debates, but the first one is by far the most iconic, has the longest lasting impact. I'm going to tell you all about it here in a second. What's funny?
So are you just saying you look good, or?
That's a great question, Jatarius. So I was being a little over the top and sarcastic in my own way. People believed he looked good, which led to people voting for him. Right? One more. What's up?
Okay.
I do have a man crush on the president of Ukraine, though.
So you see how the other picture you showed us was black and white, but that picture was just.
Yep. So this is the television feed itself would have been in black and white. This is a colorized photo, which is amazing technology. And a lot of the World War II pictures I showed you that have color to them, they've been colorized.
So every time I try to think about that now,
Yeah,
like,
you're right. No, a lot of it. But think about it. Life was in color.
Yeah, this always.
But photographs
I was
were
thinking
black and white.
life was black and white.
Yep. So the story of this very first debate, Jatarius points out this is a colorized photo. On that day, President Nixon, he's vice president. Vice President Nixon, he had spent the day studying. He's actually recently out of the hospital. He had a knee injury. Okay, so he's in the hospital. He's not in the utmost of physical health. On the day of the debate, he spends the day studying. That's what a good political candidate should do, in my opinion, right? Study the material, know what you believe, how are you going to respond to the various questions. Like, that's being a good student. Well, because he spent the day studying, he was up for a long time. He woke up early. He studied through the day. He hadn't been outside all day, so he comes to the TV studio tired and looking tired. He actually has, but by the time he goes on camera, he's got a 5 o'clock shadow, kind of like Brandon. Brandon, look at me. Brandon's kind of got that 5 o'clock shadow, that day-old beard a little bit. Brandon's a little more than just one day, but a day-old beard. Because of such, he looked haggard, right? He looked old. He looked tired. And if the emphasis is on appearances, he didn't look as good as his opponent. On the other hand, Kennedy spent the day, do you know what he spent the day doing? Sunning himself on the roof of the hotel. Yes, pampering himself. He laid out in the sun, got bronzed a little bit. So he arrives at the television studio looking fresh, looking bronzed, relaxed, refreshed. Nixon even refuses to wear stage makeup. You go on TV, you're supposed to, they generally put a little bit of a coloration on you because the lights will wash you out. Nixon didn't want to wear stage makeup. Why? Because it's effeminate, right? Women wear makeup. Well, it serves to make him kind of look washed out, and that just contributed to his appearance, his negative appearance overall.
So they did all that, got frished up. What was the point they go get on black and white?
It is black and white, but it's still, you could facial features and all that. He didn't look bronzy in terms of a color, but you can tell what a healthy skin, radiant, healthy skin looks like. That's a good question. So here's a rough-looking Nixon. He was doing things like wiping his nose and, just generally unappealing versus really, oh man, what a charmer. What a good-looking young Jack Kennedy. So what you have here is muy guapo, right? Good-looking Jack Kennedy versus, haggard old-looking Richard Nixon. And what you get out of that is this debate was watched by 70 million Americans. It's a very large number for the time. It's a very large number still for today. And it makes debates into a spectator sport. These days, when the presidential cycle is on, the election cycle is on, people want to watch the debates. I remember Trump versus Hillary, right? That was must-see TV. Trump versus Biden was like disastrous TV. It was like the two old men in the Muppets just kind of kept calling at each other, right? But it turned it into something totally different. It turned it into must-see TV, turned it into a performance. Here's a really ironic story for you. Kennedy's running mate, who is President Johnson, he's going to go on to be the president himself. Kennedy's running mate wasn't able to catch the debate on TV. I think he was riding in a car at the time, so he wasn't able to see a TV, but he could listen to a radio. Most people watched it on TV, but of course it was still on the radio. Johnson thought that Kennedy lost the debate. He thought Nixon ran away with the debate, was the better speaker, was the better debater, but Johnson only heard it. So the take there is that from listening to their words, Nixon was probably the better speaker, the better candidate. But television put an emphasis on the appearance, and that made Kennedy into the more favored candidate. So that is how the presidential election of 1960 really changed the face of American politics and campaigning. And walk along with me on technology here. I mean, we start with written letters, right? Horse and pony carriers, telegraph, telephone, radio. Each new step is a better way to stay connected. Television, and then today, what are we dealing with? World Wide Web, internet, Wi-Fi, social media, all that. So every step of technology also contributes to politics and how we stay connected, history in that regard as well. So 1960 presidential election. Kennedy, of course, is the man who wishes to put a man, or he's a president who sets the goal to put a man on the moon. He sets this goal and does not live to see it happen, but it is largely considered a part of his legacy. Cuban Missile Crisis, which we already talked about. This is where we went to the gym and threw the volleyballs. This is when the Russians, or the Soviets, brought nuclear warheads to Cuba, 90 miles away from the United States. Here's the map. Here's the range ring. This is why it was such a scary time, because a short-range missile, a medium-range missile, a long-range missile can touch almost all the United States and Canada and Latin America for that matter. So the Soviets having nuclear warheads in Cuba is a very scary time. Kennedy leads through this crisis. It's a very tense 13 days. It's characterized by the president and his inner circle making most of these decisions by themselves. Congress wasn't involved, military wasn't involved. It was really like the man, the president, and his inner circle making these decisions together. It ends with us removing missiles from Turkey and them removing the missiles from Cuba. So it's kind of like a 1-for-1, which is exactly what we did on the basketball court. That's why I had you holding different signs and trying to be the different people. Shows the president connecting with the country on television, much like that's what television allowed him to do. So starts with the debates, but then it turns into a way that he can stay in touch with the country even after he's elected president. All right, assassination, conspiracy, blood and guts. Are you ready for it? Yes, this is the end of President Kennedy, the tragic demise by assassination of JFK. JFK is assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. I'm just kind of giving you the upfront. He was killed in a motorcade in Dallas, Texas. On that same day, the vice president, Lyndon Johnson, becomes president. So we have a change in the president on that day. And, while his life and his term in office are cut short, his legacy increases, actually probably increases in a way that it wouldn't have had he stayed alive. Have you ever heard the old phrase, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain? Who's to say? We don't know, right? I don't have a time machine. But if Kennedy hadn't died on this day, maybe he doesn't get reelected. Maybe he does get reelected, but in his second term, he makes decisions that aren't as popular, and maybe his legacy goes downward. We don't know. He definitely died at the peak of his popularity and his influence. A lot of the bad things about him related to his morality and his womanizing, a lot of that hadn't really been uncovered just yet. So in the next couple of years, what if his reputation went downward? We don't know, right? Don't have a time machine. Kind of interesting to think about. Here's a picture of them on that day. They're in this presidential limo. You can see Texas was a very important state for the upcoming election. He needed to carry Dallas. He needed to carry Texas. He needed to get all those electoral votes. So he's kind of like pre-campaign, right? Hey, Dallas, I love you. Yeah, you love me too. All right. So here they are in their open top limousine, which just kind of reminds me a whole lot of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, 1914, World War I. Why do these people ride around in limousines that don't have a cover on them? You see? Remember this picture? Archduke Franz Ferdinand, World War I, right? We lived it out with a little skit, I think. So here we have history repeating itself. Of course it does. And it's just not going to go well for him. He is assassinated from the 6th floor of this building, which is called the Dallas Book Depository Building. Basically just an old warehouse. The window that the arrow is pointing at, that is the window that his assassin shot out of. This is a recreation of what it would have looked like for the sniper to be coming out of that window. And this picture always gets me because this is basically the angle that the shot was taken at. The car, the limo, was going away from the shooter. And just like those cars are kind of in the background, the shot came from the back of the president's head. So just like this angle right here. Now, the man alleged to have assassinated him is named Lee Harvey Oswald. And the story told in kind of the official government report is that he acted alone by himself. He was a former Marine sniper, so he did have training in weapons. He did have training in marksmanship. He was in the U.S. military, but then he kind of got radicalized towards communism. He was a communist sympathizer, right? He's the kind of person that McCarthyism should have rooted out, not Hollywood types. But the story is that he assassinated Kennedy because he was a communist and Kennedy was anti-communist. Many people don't fully buy this story. Many people have a hard time believing it was just one person, a lone gunman. Many people have issues with the angle of the shots. They say that it couldn't have been just one shooter. There's a story, part of the conspiracy story, that there was at least another shooter. Some people say the CIA was involved or the FBI was involved. Some people say it was the Russians. There is a lot of mystery surrounding the assassination of JFK.
Some people say it was like his bodyguard, he was in the seat, like, I think he acting up a shot out of the AR.
There are a lot of different theories. Here's what I give to that, right? I've done a fair amount of reading. I try to think like a historian. Don't just look at the crazy headlines, but actually try to find the truth. I think that sometimes when we don't have all the answers, what do our brains tend to do? Fill in the blanks with maybe information that sounds good, or even the juicy part of the story that we want to be. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. There is some confusing details that, I scratch my head about as well. There's some interesting tidbits to the story, kind of hard to understand. To this day, no person has been held accountable for President Kennedy's assassination. The official report does not formally lay the blame on Lee Harvey Oswald. It is just assumed he was the shooter. I will tell you how his story ends here in just a second. This is the street where it happened today. Okay, that building in the background, the square building, that's the building where the shot was taken from. The X on the ground is where there's actually two X's on the ground because there were 3 shots total. 2 of them hit the president. So there's one X. This is the first X. He was hit through the back of his neck and it came out his throat. And then a little bit later on, there's a second X. He was hit in the back of the head, and it basically opened up his brain, and that was the fatal shot. So 3 shots total, 2 shots hit the president, and this is what it looks like today. This is, you may guess that we have visited before. These are my girls standing on the second X. So the building is kind of like over here, and the shot will be taken kind of right to where they're standing. This is exactly how people go and visit, right? It's not some mega memorial. They just kind of wait for traffic to break and then go stand out. So that's exactly what the girls did. We took a spring break homeschool visit one time. This next, and this is where I'm going to pause to show you the video. So I'm going to give you the upfront disclaimer. The first video I'm going to show you is kind of a compilation that tells the story in about 1 minute. The second video is the only footage that exists from this moment. Okay, it's a home movie. It is nicknamed the Zapruder film because the man who filmed it, his last name is Zapruder. It's on one of those old, like 8mm videos. It goes like tick, 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 tick. Like you can almost hear the film clicking through it. It's grainy. It's not 4K HD or anything like that. But you can see the blood spatter. So I'm just giving you the upfront. If you want to put your head down, you can. Or we are a mature class and we're going to watch this history together, okay? So first video is the compilation. That's the second video. All right, get the volume good here.
U.S. President John Fitzgerald Kennedy's visit to Dallas, Texas on November the 22nd, 1963 was aimed at boosting his re-election bid ahead of the 1964 presidential vote. Thousands turned out to see the iconic leader and his wife Jacqueline travel in a motorcade through downtown Dallas. At 12:30 p.m. local time, as the president's open-top limousine reached Dealey Plaza, 3 gunshots were fired at the convoy. 2 bullets hit the president, 1 wounded him at the back of the neck and throat, the other caused a massive and fatal head injury. The president was pronounced dead at 1 p.m. in an historic announcement that stunned America. A government investigation found the shots were fired from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository by 24-year-old Lee Harvey Oswald. But the suspect was never tried. 2 days later, he was shot dead by local cabaret owner Jack Ruby during a prison transfer. The fact the identity of Kennedy's assassin was never proven in the courts has given rise to various alternative and unproven theories as to what really happened and who may have been behind it. A House of Representatives report in 1979 concluded there was a high possibility that 2 gunmen were involved.
All right, so that is probably the best 1-minute summary you could ever ask for. There's plenty more to the story, but that was a good 1-minute summary. This is the Zapruder film. We'll watch it twice, okay? It's slowed down, and you're going to see what I said. It's a little bit grainy, but here we go.
This version tracks the limousine and maintains President Kennedy and Governor Conley at center frame. This version is also in slow motion.
So his wife is in pink. That's the first shot. He flinches. Ooh. Second shot, fatal. She reaches back to help a Secret Service agent get into the vehicle, and they're speeding off to the hospital. So, yeah, well, I mean, slow motion. You're right, but the first shot, he flinches, he kind of reaches towards his throat. That's the moment of the first shot, and then the second shot, you can see a little bit more obvious.
This version tracks the limousine and maintains President Kennedy and Governor Conley at center frame. This version is also in slow motion.
So there it is, big portion of American history, very famous footage. What kind of a source is it? That's right, primary source. So we're historians, we can look at that type of footage.
Did anybody else in the vehicle get hit?
Great question. The governor was hit. The governor is seated right in front of Kennedy, and that is actually part of the conspiracy. People who've done a lot of analysis on the path of the bullet and all that say that for the governor to have been hit from that angle, it would have required one of the bullets to bend, and they call it the magic bullet. They say it didn't come from the same angle. That's why there's a second shooter, right? There's no such thing as a bending bullet, a magic bullet that contributes to the conspiracy. And there's plenty of reading out there for you to do. Here's what I would encourage you to do. If you're gonna think like a historian, find good sources. Don't go to ranker.com or Board Panda or TikTok, for goodness sakes, right? Find some good sourcing, find a balanced report. The best reporting says evidence points to this. Some criticisms of that are, what's your balanced report in the middle? And read a lot. Read a lot to kind of come up with your own conclusions. So this is definitely one of those internet black holes where you can get real crazy with conspiracy theories, such like that. Moving on here. So you saw his wife in her very iconic pink attire. Jackie Kennedy was one of those first ladies that brought a lot of style to America. She was America's first lady. Everybody wanted to be her. So, you know, when she dresses out for the day, she thinks she's going to be waving at people in a parade. Well, she ends the day, of course, with her husband's blood spatter all over her. And, well, what did she not do to her clothes on that day? She did not clean herself. Yeah, she actually refused to move the bloodstained clothing. And she actually says to the vice president's wife, which of course he's being sworn in as president, she says that she wanted them to see what they had done to Jack. And that statement alone kind of fuels the conspiracy as well. Because she said, I want them, plural, to see what they have done to Jack. So the question is, did she suspect someone was involved in the assassination of her husband? Did she think it was within the government? Did she think it was the Soviets? She said, I want them to see what they've done to Jack. which is why she didn't clean her clothes. So that statement alone also kind of adds to the conspiracy. Here's a picture of President Johnson swearing in on the airplane, on the president's airplane. Jackie Kennedy is standing right next to him, again in her blood-soaked clothing. This is the shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald, and he was arrested. He was arrested on that same day. He was put in jail, and 2 days later, he was shot in public on camera. He was shot by a man named Jack Ruby. So Oswald in the middle. This is a Texas Ranger police officer, Jack Ruby with the gun. And this, well, dead men what? Tell no tales, right? So he was silenced. Essentially, Lee Harvey Oswald had no more story to tell because he was silenced. So this also leads to the conspiracy thoughts. Why was he assassinated 2 days later? We'll never get some of our questions answered. Jack Ruby, the shooter, was not said to be someone that would just go up and murder another person, right? He was said to be a quieter, at-home guy. He was a bartender. He's a good old guy. So the fact that he was the shooter, people are like, that's not Jack Ruby. That's not something he would do. Just adds all the more to the conspiracy. So lots of question marks and head scratchers about the Kennedy assassination. Either way, the nation was in mourning. The nation grieved for their president. This is his wife in black, his brother, Robert Kennedy. Advance yourself 5 years, you know he's going to be assassinated. And his children, Caroline and John Jr. John Jr. has this very powerful moment where he salutes his dad's casket as it goes by. He's 3 years old. JFK Jr., he's 3 years old. He was the darling of the country, right? He'd already been in all the news magazines and people knew about Jack. So for him to now have this very poignant moment of saluting his father's casket kind of sums up the nation's grieving. He will go on to die in a plane crash in 1998. So the Kennedys are rife with tragedy and sadness. Just because you're rich and famous doesn't mean you're going to have a easy life. No, you think so? This is President Kennedy's grave to this day. It's at Arlington National Cemetery. And what you'll notice is that this is an eternal flame. His wife lit this the day that he was buried, and it has been lit ever since. What? It's got propane gas that feeds it at all times. So wind, rain, sleet, snow, day, night, the eternal flame is always lit. This is Kennedy. His wife joined him. She died in 1994, regular cause of death, for her. And guess what? There's also 2 children. They have 2 children buried alongside them. So the Kennedy family, one was a stillborn baby, and one died as a 1-year-old. So the Kennedy family certainly had a lot of tragedy come their way. I've been able to visit, and I recommend that you do as well. Washington, D.C. This is part of Arlington National Cemetery. What's that? Let's see. Was she the last one? Well, she's got children still. I think, well, the boy died. I think Caroline is the girl. I think she's still alive. Yep. So, yeah, that kind of rounds out Kennedy. Great book. Which, do I have this book on my shelf? I'm not sure I do. Killing Kennedy by Bill O'Reilly. This one right here is a fiction book. Okay, I don't usually advertise fiction books to you. It's by Stephen King. It involves time travel. And like we talked about a lot, it's kind of like going back and seeing if you can change history. So a lot of true facts in the book, but of course they're also playing with time travel. So it's kind of interesting there. Both of these books have been made into movies. This is actually on Hulu. It's a series. I think it's a 10-part series called 11/22/63. Very interesting story, thinking about changing history. And really the question is, should you? Would we come back to a better world? Would Kennedy staying alive change the world for better or worse? We don't know. That's why it's interesting to think about. I'll round out Kennedy with this. This is from his inaugural address. He only had one inaugural address. He says the phrase, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And of course, that should speak to selflessness. Instead of me, give me, he's saying, ask how you can serve your fellow human beings and your country. So a pretty powerful statement from President Kennedy. Going to blast through Johnson here. Sailor's about to bust on in. And of course, you can get it from the Google slides as well. So Johnson, he becomes president because Kennedy dies. He does all the things related to the Vietnam War, Gulf of Tonkin, Vietnam, Tet, unrest on the home front during the Vietnam War, and he's tired. He decides to not run in 1968, which leaves the door open to the next man that we're going to talk about tomorrow, Nixon. So this is Johnson. We've really already talked about all of those, but write that down for his baseball card. Here's the new information we're about to get to: Johnson's Great Society, Cesar Chavez, and the National Organization for Women. So I'm blasting. I'd ask you to just pay attention as I talk, and of course you can be writing as we go. First of all, I should mention he was the one who actually signs the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This was presented by the Kennedys, the Kennedy family, but President Kennedy started the Civil Rights Act. But Johnson is the one who is president when it is passed. Largely is passed under the emphasis of the assassinated president's legacy. Do this because this is what Kennedy would have wanted. The country was willing to be to adopt what Kennedy wanted, right? It was a tragedy that he died, so a lot of his legacy got carried into some of these things that get passed, such as civil rights and space race. Johnson's, so what does he do for the country? Johnson's Great Society. This is a series of programs that are designed to give aid to the poor, the elderly, and the sick. Now, who in the world wouldn't want to give aid to the poor, the elderly, and the sick? Doesn't that sound great on its surface? Of course we want to help the poor, the elderly, and the sick. How are we going to do it? Many different programs. Medicare, Medicaid, that's still around today. Education bills, environmental bills, arts and humanities, Job Corps, Head Start, lots of programs. What do programs cost? Money. So this is the criticism of Johnson's Great Society, right? While it sounds great to assist the poor, the elderly, and the sick, the criticism of that is going to require a major increase in taxes. That is your money going to the government, okay? A lot of people like to keep their own money. A lot of people like to work for their paycheck, get their paycheck, and keep their paycheck. So the criticism is going to be that this is close to socialism. If you're collecting my money and redistributing it to other people, the poor, the elderly, and the sick, you're still giving away my money. If I want to help them with my charity, I'll do that on my own. I don't need the government to do that for me. That's the criticism. Additionally, there's also deficit spending. The government was literally spending money it didn't have. So war on poverty, helping the poor, the elderly, and the sick. By gosh, that sounds great. But Johnson's Great Society was going to cost a lot of money. It did cost a lot of money. So that's the criticism of Johnson's Great Society. Moving on to Cesar Chavez. This is him on your screen. He is the Martin Luther King Jr. for Hispanic Americans. I want to mention his partner as well. Her name is not in our standards, but you really can't say them apart from each other. There is also Dolores Huerta, and she is the female version of a Hispanic civil rights worker. So just like the African American community has Martin Luther King Jr. working on their behalf for civil rights legislation, Hispanic Americans have Cesar Chavez. Similarly to Martin Luther King Jr., his big strategy is nonviolence. We're not going to fight. We're not going to break things. We're not going to burn things. We're going to have nonviolent protests to advance our message. What was his message? Well, what do Hispanic workers, what jobs do they tend to hold? Farm and agriculture, right? Being involved in picking and packaging and all things related to agriculture. At the time, in the 60s, it was for low wages and poor working conditions, long working hours. So Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, they take on the cause of fighting for better pay and better working conditions for Hispanic workers. In California, the big crop was grapes. Around here, it's blueberries, right? Other places, other crops. But in California, it was grapes. Cesar Chavez organizes a grape strike, or rather a boycott of buying California grapes, because a lot of people didn't know how poorly the workers were being treated. They would buy these California grapes, regular table grapes, grapes used in wine, grapes used in raisins. They buy these grape products, and they didn't realize that they were being picked, with a lot of labor issues, a lot of poorly treated laborers. So Cesar Chavez organizes this grape boycott. Eventually, the growers had to pay attention. Enough people boycotted grapes that the grape growers had to finally give better pay, better work conditions, better hours to the grape pickers, the Hispanics who worked on the grape in the grape fields. So Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, they are civil rights advocates for Hispanics. Their big rallying cry is "Si se puede," which means, can you say it in English? No? Yes, we can. Si se puede means yes, we can. This is their rallying cry, their logo. And there's a comparison to be made to Rosie the River. We can do it. Si se puede, yes we can, means the same thing. This is just an example of how it exists still to this day. Okay, so the Hispanic Farm Workers of America, what is it? Union Farm Workers is an organization that's still around to this day. And I always try to make a modern day comparison. This is President Biden's Oval Office, right as he took office. Now think about when the president comes into office, he gets to decorate the Oval Office, and the things he chooses kind of says something about him, right? If he chooses a picture of Abraham Lincoln or George Washington, like he's kind of taking on the characteristics of that president or person, whatever the case may be. President Biden has a bust of Cesar Chavez surrounded by his own family photographs right behind him, right behind his desk in the Oval Office. And it's as if to say it shows Biden's belief in workers and their dignity, as if Biden is for the common man. So that's a pretty significant selection by President Biden. I remember it got attention because it was a little bit out there, right? It's normal to choose a presidential bust, but Biden chose Cesar Chavez to show that he is for the working man. So just kind of bringing that connection to you in the modern. All right, final one. National Organization for Women. What do they want?
Right.
Equality. When do they want it? Yeah, it's that simple. They want equality in the workforce, in education, in labor, in the military. And by gosh, when do they want it?
Now.
It's in the name of their organization. They want it now. What do we want? Equality. When do we want it now? And that is going to be the final summary of our class today. Hey, Sayla, you came here right as we were ending, right on time. I'm going to leave it right there. I'm going to let some of y'all are writing frantically, and I love it. So I'm going to let you do your own thinking and your own writing as we finish up here today. We get tidy up, and I'll high five you on the way out the door because I won't see you for 2 weeks. I will not be here tomorrow.